Hello guys. Welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash became a teacher in Alola. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The quiet return. The salt spray felt like a memory. It ghosted across Ash's face, a cool, damp caress that tasted of home, though this place had only been his home for a short, brilliant season of his life. He stood at the prow of the inter-island ferry as it sliced through the slate-gray waters of the pre-dawn ocean, the engines a low, rhythmic thrum beneath his feet. Mele Mele Island was a silhouette against a sky just beginning to bleed from indigo to a soft, bruised purple. The volcanic peaks of the island were wreathed in a silver mist, making them look like slumbering giants. Beside him, Pikachu's ears twitched, catching sounds Ash couldn't. The distant cry of a wingull, the gentle lapping of waves against the hull, the hum of the world waking up. The little mouse Pokemon was a warm, solid weight on the railing, his presence a familiar anchor in the shifting tides of Ash's life. 5 years. It was a lifetime. The world knew him as the monarch, the unbeatable champion who had climbed the mountain and, upon reaching its summit, had simply walked away. They didn't understand. They couldn't. The roar of the stadium crowds, the blinding flash of cameras, the endless cycle of challengers and endorsements. It had all become noise, a hollow echo in a chamber that was meant to be filled with the pure, unadulterated joy of a Pokemon battle. The connection, the sacred dialogue between trainer and Pokemon, had been drowned out. So he had left. He had taken Pikachu, and a select, trusted few of his oldest partners, and vanished into the unforgiving wilderness of Mount Silver. There, in the biting winds and silent snows, he had sought not new strength, but old truth. He hadn't been training for another tournament. He had been learning to listen again. To the world, to his Pokemon, and to the quiet, powerful hum of the aura that had always flowed within him, a river he had only ever skimmed the surface of. Now, that river ran deep and clear. He could feel the life force of the ocean beneath him, a vast, complex tapestry of a million sleeping consciousnesses. He could feel the burgeoning energy of the island ahead, the ancient, potent mana that saturated its very soil. It was a symphony he was only just learning the notes to, and it was the reason he was here. Professor Kukui's offer had come through a coded message, delivered by a Firo to his mountain camp. A simple, elegant piece of communication that respected his desire for anonymity. Alola needs teachers, Ash. Not just for the kids. I think it needs you. It was a purpose, a quiet and meaningful one, far from the gilded cage of the championship. It was a chance to give back, not with grand victories, but with quiet guidance. A chance to build, not a legacy, but a foundation. The Pharaoh's horn blared, a deep, resonant sound that rolled across the water and seemed to shake the mist from the air. The lights of Hau'oli City's marina winked into existence, warm and inviting. No press. No cheering crowds. Just a handful of dockworkers securing lines and the smell of fresh brewed coffee drifting from a nearby kiosk. Ash pulled the hood of his simple gray cloak further over his head, a garment designed for mountain squalls that served just as well to obscure a face the world's media would pay a fortune to photograph. He adjusted the worn leather pack on his shoulders. He carried little. Everything he truly needed was in the worn Pokeballs on his belt or standing right beside him. "Ready for a new start, buddy?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble that was barely audible over the wind. "Pikachu," Pikachu replied, his tone one of absolute, unshakable confidence. He trusted Ash. It was as simple as that. The where and the why were secondary. They disembarked with the other handful of early morning travelers, merchants, commuters, a family returning from a visit to another island. No one gave him a second glance. He was just another shadow in the growing light. He breathed in the all-alone air, a complex perfume of plumeria, sweet ginger, salt, and damp earth. It was different from the sterile, frigid air of the mountain. This air was alive, thick with humidity and the promise of growth. He and Pikachu walked through the still quiet streets of the city, their footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. The path to the Pokemon school was etched into his memory, a trail of sun-drenched days and star-filled nights. But the landscape of his memory and the reality before him were not quite the same. The school was larger. Much larger. What had been a charming, open-air campus was now a sprawling, multi-building institution that blended seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. The original building was still there, the heart of it all, but now it was flanked by a gleaming, three-story research annex made of sustainable bamboo and solar-paneled glass, and a vast, multi-biome battle stadium whose retractable roof was currently open to the morning sky. Winding stone paths connected the structures, shaded by lush, flowering trees he didn't recognize. It spoke of success, of growth, of a dream fully realized. It spoke of Professor Kukui's tireless passion. He found the professor not in an office, but in one of the new greenhouses, tending to a row of grassy pelts. Kukui looked different, too. The 5 years had been kind, but they had left their mark. His hair was a little longer, tied back in a short tail at the nape of his neck. There were fine lines around his eyes, etched there by laughter and long hours spent under the Alolan sun. He still wore his signature lab coat, but it was unbuttoned over a simple t-shirt and cargo shorts, the uniform of a man perfectly at home in his work. He moved with a new economy, a settled confidence that had replaced the boundless, almost frantic energy Ash remembered. "They need a specific mineral balance," Kukui said, not looking up as Ash approached. He seemed to be speaking to the plants themselves. "Too much nitrogen and the leaves lose their sheen. And the scent changes," Ash added quietly. "It becomes sharper, more acidic." Kukui's hands stilled. He slowly straightened up, turning with a wide, incredulous grin that was so familiar it made Ash's chest ache with a sudden pang of nostalgia. "I knew it. I knew you'd come." He closed the distance in 3 long strides and pulled Ash into a powerful, one-armed hug, clapping him on the back. It wasn't the handshake of colleagues, but the embrace of family. "It's good to see you, Ash. It's really good to see you." "You too, Professor." The title felt comfortable, right? Kukui. "It's just Kukui now," the man insisted, pulling back to look him over. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, took in the travel-worn cloak, the quiet confidence in Ash's posture, the subtle but profound shift in his presence. "Mount Silver agreed with you. You're calmer. Like a deep lake." "The noise was getting too loud," Ash said simply. "I needed to find a quieter place." "Pika." Pikachu chirped, leaping from Ash's shoulder into Kukui's waiting arms for a welcome scratch behind the ears. "And you haven't changed a bit, you little sparkplug," Kukui chuckled. "Come on. Let me show you what we've built, and then we can talk philosophy." The tour was staggering. Kukui's passion was evident in every detail. The research annex wasn't just a building, it was an ecosystem. One lab perfectly replicated the humid, moss-covered environment of a deep jungle floor, where students studied the intricate symbiotic relationships between bug and grass types. Another was a cavernous aquatic center, saltwater and freshwater tanks simulating reef and river habitats, with observation windows below the waterline. He showed Ash the new student dormitories, recognizing the need to house promising trainers from other islands and even other regions who were now coming to Alola to study its unique Pokémon ecology. "We're not just a school anymore, Ash," Kukui explained, his voice resonating with pride. "We're becoming a full-fledged university. The Alola League brought attention, but we want to be known for more than just battles. We want to be a hub for research, conservation, and a new way of thinking about the connection between humans and Pokémon." They walked into the main hall of the original building. It was filled with students now, a vibrant river of youthful energy. They were older than the students Ash remembered, mostly teenagers and young adults. They moved with purpose, their conversations a low, excited murmur about battle theory, breeding genetics, and field research proposals. They were the advanced students, the ones Ash would be teaching. Several of them recognized Kukui and offered respectful greetings, their eyes flicking curiously towards the hooded man at his side. Ash kept his face shadowed, his presence deliberately muted. He wasn't the monarch here. He was just a new teacher. "Your class will be Advanced Tactical Theory and In-Field Application," Kukui said, leading him towards a large, state-of-the-art classroom. "It's less about type matchups and more about psychology. Terrain manipulation, improvisation, understanding your opponent's mindset. It's a course I designed, but I've never had the right person to teach it. Someone who's lived it, breathed it, and understands that the strongest battles are won here." He tapped his temple, not just on the field. As they rounded a corner, a sudden commotion erupted from an outdoor paddock connected to the main building. A wave of panicked shouts sent students scrambling. Ash's senses, honed by years of solitude and aura training, immediately sharpened. He didn't just hear the chaos, he felt it. A spike of pure, primal fear, followed by confusion and anger. In the center of the paddock, a Tauros was bucking wildly. It was a magnificent creature, its 3 tails lashing, muscles bunched and powerful under its dark hide. Its eyes were wide with terror. 2 student trainers were trying to contain it, their Pokémon, a nervous-looking Arcanine and a young, hesitant Decidueye, circling the beast to no effect. The Arcanine's intimidating growls only seemed to agitate the Tauros further, and the Decidueye's arrows were landing harmlessly in the packed earth walls of the enclosure as the bull Pokémon thrashed. "Get back! It's out of control," one of the students yelled, recalling his Arcanine just as a powerful hoof slammed into the ground where it had been standing. Kukui was about to intervene, his hand already moving towards a Pokeball on his belt, but Ash placed a calming hand on his arm. "Let me," he said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. He slipped through the gate into the paddock, moving with a fluid grace that belied any sense of urgency. The students stared, one of them finally recognizing him with a sharp, incredulous gasp, but Ash paid them no mind. His focus was entirely on the Tauros. He didn't reach for a Pokeball. Pikachu, sensing his trainer's intent, remained perched on a fence post, a silent observer. Ash didn't approach the Tauros head-on. He circled, keeping a wide berth, his movements slow and deliberate. He closed his eyes for a moment, and to the onlookers, it might have seemed like a moment of foolish hesitation. But inside, he was reaching out. Not with his mind, but with his very essence. He pushed aside the chaotic surface emotions, the fear, the rage, and searched for the source. He felt it then. A sharp, stabbing pain in the Tauros's left foreleg, and beneath that, a deep, foundational anxiety. It wasn't a wild animal. It was a hurt and terrified one. He projected a feeling. Not a thought, not a command, but a pure, unadulterated sensation of calm. It was the feeling of cool water on a hot day, of soft grass in a quiet meadow, of a silent, snowy night on the mountain. He wrapped this feeling in his aura and gently extended it, not as a wave to overwhelm, but as a current for the Tauros to find. The great bull's rampage began to slow. Its frantic movements became less erratic. It stopped bucking and stood, sides heaving, its 3 tails twitching nervously. It turned its massive head, and its wild eyes, still fearful, locked onto Ash. It snorted, pawing the ground, but the frantic edge was gone. Ash continued his slow, circling approach, his own breathing deep and even, his heartbeat a steady, reassuring drum. He was now a beacon of tranquility in the Tauros's storm of panic. "Easy now," he said, his voice soft, melodic. "No one is going to hurt you. Let me see. Let me help." He was close now, within striking distance. The students held their breath. Kukui watched, a look of profound understanding on his face. Ash knelt, lowering his profile, making himself less of a threat. He extended a hand, palm open and upward. The Tauros watched the hand, then looked back at his eyes. It saw no aggression, no fear, only a deep, abiding empathy. Slowly, hesitantly, the massive creature took a step forward, and then another. It lowered its head and nudged Ash's outstretched hand. Ash began to stroke the Tauros's muzzle, his touch gentle. He continued to project that same calming aura, a soothing balm on the creature's frayed nerves. With his other hand, he slowly, carefully, ran his fingers down the Tauros's foreleg. He found it almost immediately, a large, cruel-looking thorn from a Ferrothorn, buried deep in the muscle just above the fetlock. The area was swollen and hot to the touch. "There it is," he whispered. "That's what's been scaring you so badly." He looked the Tauros in the eye. "This will hurt for a second. But then it will be better, trust me." The Tauros seemed to understand. It stood perfectly still, its breathing still heavy but no longer ragged. With a quick, sure movement, Ash gripped the base of the thorn and pulled. It came free with a sickening pop. The Tauros grunted, its leg bucking instinctively, but it didn't pull away. It didn't attack. Ash held up the bloody thorn for a moment before tossing it aside. He then placed his palm flat against the wound. A soft, blue light emanated from his hand, visible even in the bright morning sun. The students gasped. It wasn't a move. It was something else. Ash was pouring a small, controlled stream of his own life energy, his aura, into the wound. It wasn't a healing technique in the way a Pokemon move was. It was more like a catalyst, encouraging the Tauros's own body to begin the healing process, soothing the pain and inflammation. After a few moments, he withdrew his hand. The swelling was already visibly reduced. The Tauros took a tentative step, then another. It turned its head and gave Ash's arm a long, rough lick with its tongue, a gesture of profound gratitude. Ash stood up, patting the creature's powerful neck. There you go. All better now. He turned to the two stunned students. He wasn't being aggressive. He was in pain. Your Arcanine's intimidate only made him feel more cornered. You have to learn to see beyond the surface, to understand the root of the problem before you try to solve it. He walked out of the paddock, leaving the now completely docile Tauros to be tended to by a school nurse who had just arrived. The crowd of students parted for him, their expressions a mixture of awe and confusion. They knew who he was, they realized now, but he was nothing like the exuberant, battle-hungry champion they had seen on television. This was someone different, someone more. Kukui was waiting for him, his arms crossed, a slow smile spreading across his face. A quiet place indeed, he said, his voice full of meaning. I see you learned more on that mountain than just how to stay warm. I learned to listen, Ash corrected gently. It's the most important skill a trainer can have. Before Kukui could reply, two new voices joined the conversation, and Ash's heart gave a sudden, unfamiliar lurch. Professor? What was all the commotion? We were in the middle of calibrating the spectroscope and, the voice trailed off. Ash turned. Lily stood there, dressed not in the simple white dress he remembered, but in the crisp, professional attire of a senior researcher, a tailored lab coat over a smart blouse and dark trousers. Her hair was longer, tied up in an elegant, efficient bun, though a few familiar blonde strands had escaped to frame her face. Her eyes, the same brilliant green, widened in shock, her hand flying to her mouth. Beside her stood Mallow, her vibrant energy a perfect counterpoint to Lily's composed presence. She, too, had blossomed. She wore a stylish chef's uniform, the logo of the Ether Paradise Culinary Institute embroidered on the sleeve. Her hair was a little shorter, a chic, practical cut, but her expression was the same, warm, open, and instantly expressive. Right now, it was a mask of pure, unadulterated astonishment. Ash? Mallow breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Is it really you? The years melted away in that single moment. He wasn't the monarch, or the Aura Guardian, or the new teacher. He was just Ash, and they were his friends. A genuine smile, the first truly unguarded one since he'd arrived, broke across his face. Hey, Lily. Mallow. It's been a while. The reunion was a blur of emotions. Mallow, recovering first, let out a joyful whoop and launched herself at him, wrapping him in a hug that smelled faintly of spices and sweet berries. It was so full of unrestrained affection that Ash found himself laughing, a real, deep laugh that felt rusty from disuse. Lily, ever more reserved, approached after Mallow had released him, her expression a complex mixture of shock, relief, and a dozen other things Ash couldn't immediately parse. We heard you, we didn't know where you'd gone, she said, her voice soft. The news said you'd retired. That you were seeking privacy. We tried to respect that, but we were so worried. I'm sorry if I worried you, Ash said, his smile softening. I just needed some time. For myself. His gaze was direct, and in it, Lily saw the profound change Kukui had noticed. The boyish fire in his eyes had not been extinguished, but banked, transformed into a steady, knowing glow. It was captivating. Well, you're here now, Mallow declared, her hands on her hips. But what are you doing here? Don't tell me you're just visiting. You can't just show up after 5 years and say hello. He's our new senior instructor, Mallow, Kukui supplied, beaming. Ash is coming home. The news sent another wave of shock through the two women. Lily's mind, always analytical, immediately started racing. His presence here, at the school, had implications. He wasn't just a friend returning. He was a resource, a power, a variable she hadn't accounted for. Mallow, on the other hand, was simply delighted. Her family's diner, now expanded into a famous restaurant, was a hub of the community, and the thought of Ash being a permanent part of that community again filled her with a simple, uncomplicated joy. You're teaching? Lily asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her initial shock. The man who conquered the World Coronation Series is going to be teaching advanced tactics. The best way to master a skill is to teach it, Ash replied smoothly, and it's better than sitting on a throne all day. They talked for what felt like hours, catching up in the shade of a large banyan tree on the school grounds. Mallow spoke of her culinary journey, of studying in Kalos and Johto before returning to elevate Alolan cuisine to the world stage. Her diner was now a destination, a place where food was both an art and a celebration of the islands. Lily, in turn, detailed her work with the Ether Foundation, which, under Lusamin's new, more ethical leadership, had become a world leader in Ultra Beast research and habitat preservation. She spoke of dimensional energy, of rift stabilization, of theoretical physics, with a passion and confidence that was breathtaking. Ash listened more than he spoke, absorbing the stories of their lives, genuinely proud of the incredible women they had become. He shared little of his own journey, offering only vague descriptions of intense training and a lot of quiet time. He didn't need to elaborate. The proof of his transformation was in his very presence. As they spoke, another, smaller drama unfolded nearby. A young student, no older than 15, was trying to work with his partner, a small, timid Rowlet. The boy was trying to teach it the move leafage, but his instructions were clinical, impatient. No, the sequence is wrong. You have to channel the energy through your wings and release it in a radial burst. It's simple physics. The boy exclaimed in frustration, scribbling equations onto a datapad. The poor Rowlet just looked confused and stressed, hooting miserably. Mallow sighed. That's Kalen. Brilliant kid. Top of his class in theory, but he treats his Pokemon like equations. He can't connect. Ash watched them for a moment, his head tilted. He saw the boy's frustration and the Pokemon's anxiety. He stood up and walked over, his approach as gentle as it had been with the Tauros. Having trouble? He asked. Kalen looked up, startled. He recognized Ash instantly, and his face flushed with a mixture of awe and embarrassment. Monarch. I mean, sir. My Rowlet isn't executing the sequence correctly. The energy dispersal is inefficient. Ash knelt down, looking not at the boy's datapad, but at the Rowlet. What does your Rowlet like to do? He asked softly. Kalen blinked. What? I don't understand. We're training. But what does he like? Ash repeated. Does he like to sunbathe? Does he like to be scratched under his beak? Does he like the taste of certain berries? I suppose he enjoys napping in my backpack, the boy stammered, confused by the line of questioning. Okay, Ash said with a nod. He turned his full attention to the little grass type. He's not a machine, Kalen. He's your partner. He doesn't understand physics. He understands feelings. He feels your frustration, and it's making him nervous. He's afraid to fail, so he's not even trying properly. He reached out and gently stroked the Rowlet's head. The bird leaned into his touch, cooing softly. Forget the move for a second. Just connect with him. Tell him it's okay. Show him you're a team, whether he gets the move right or not. Ash looked at Kalen, and the boy saw that same intense, empathetic focus he had shown the Tauros. The move isn't the goal. The partnership is. The moves come from the partnership. Not the other way around. Try again. But this time, don't command. Ask. Ash walked back to the group, leaving a stunned and thoughtful Kalen to look at his Rowlet in a completely new light. Mallow was smiling, a warm, knowing expression on her face. That was the Ash she remembered, the one who understood the heart of a Pokemon better than anyone. Lily, however, was watching with a different kind of intensity. She saw not just empathy, but an almost frightening level of perception. It was as if he could see the invisible lines of emotion and energy that connected everything. It was a phenomenon she couldn't quantify, and it fascinated her. You're a natural teacher, she said, her voice laced with admiration. I had good teachers, he replied, his eyes flicking to Kukui, who simply nodded in acknowledgement. As the day wore on, Mallow had to leave to oversee the dinner service at her restaurant, but not before making Ash promise to come for a celebratory meal. No arguments. My treat. We have 5 years of catching up to do, and I want to hear everything, she insisted, her energy as bright and warm as the Alolan sun. With Mallow gone, a quieter, more serious atmosphere settled between Ash and Lily as Kukui was called away to handle some administrative work. The easy nostalgia of their reunion gave way to the present. There's another reason I was at the school today, Ash, Lily began, her tone shifting from friendly to professional. It's why I was calibrating the spectroscope. We've been detecting something strange. A background energy signature across the entire archipelago. It's faint, but it's unlike anything I've ever seen. It doesn't match any known Ultra Beast energy, nor does it resemble the natural mana of the islands." Her words immediately put Ash on alert. His newfound sensitivity to the world's energy had been picking up on something as well, a faint, discordant hum at the very edge of his perception. He had dismissed it as a byproduct of returning to such a vibrant environment after years of stillness. But hearing Lily give it a name, a scientific context, sent a chill down his spine. "Show me," he said, his voice dropping into a more serious register. Lily led him to the new research annex, into a lab that was clearly her personal domain. It was a space of controlled chaos. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing complex energy waveforms and geological maps of Alola. Bookshelves were crammed with texts on theoretical physics and ancient Alolan history. In the center of the room was a large console surrounding a suspended crystal that pulsed with a soft, white light. "This is a prototype," Lily explained, her fingers flying across the console's interface. "It's a dimensional resonance scanner. It's designed to measure the stability of the space-time membrane, primarily for predicting natural wormhole formations. For weeks, it's been picking up a low-frequency tremor. A vibration that isn't geological or atmospheric." She pulled up a specific waveform on the main holographic display. It was a sine wave, mostly stable, but marred by a subtle, ugly flicker. A jagged, unnatural spike that repeated at irregular intervals. "That's it," she said, pointing to the spike. "I call it the anomaly. It's getting stronger. Slowly, but measurably. The first readings were almost negligible. Now they're strong enough to interfere with sensitive equipment. That's why I was here, to see if the school's sensors were picking it up too." "They are." Ash didn't just look at the data on the screen. He closed his eyes, extending his senses, using the data as a focal point. He reached out with his aura, searching for that specific, jarring frequency in the living energy of the island. He found it, and it was horrifying. It felt dead. It was a sterile, cancerous vibration in the symphony of life. It was the energy of a machine that did not care for life, the feeling of a void. It was an energy of pure consumption, a soundless scream in the beautiful music of Alola. When his senses touched it, it felt like static, like sandpaper on his soul, and it left a residue of coldness that made him shiver. He opened his eyes, his expression grim. "It's worse than you think, Lily," he said, his voice low and heavy. "It's not just an energy signature. It feels hungry. It's wrong. Deeply wrong." Lily stared at him, her scientific mind struggling to process his esoteric description. But she could see the truth of it in his eyes. He wasn't speculating. He was describing a sensation as real to him as the solid floor beneath their feet. He felt the anomaly. And it scared him. For the first time since he had met this new, impossibly serene version of Ash Ketchum, Lily saw a flicker of genuine, cold dread in his eyes. The quiet return was over. Something was coming for their home. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2 The Whispers of the Sea. The morning sun over Hau'oli City's marina was a brilliant, almost aggressive thing. It baked the scent of salt and drying fishing nets out of the wooden piers and glinted off the chrome railings of the vessel moored at the end of Dock 7. This was not the charming, slightly ramshackle fishing boat Ash remembered Lana helming with her father. This was the Tidal Spirit. The ship was a testament to Lana's evolution, a sleek, formidable piece of engineering designed for the deep ocean. Her hull was a dark, pragmatic blue, shaped to cut through heavy swells with minimal resistance. The deck was a wide, open workspace, its non-slip surface dotted with secure tie-downs and recessed equipment hatches. A compact, powerful-looking submersible crane was folded neatly at the stern, and the bridge was a bubble of reinforced, polarized glass, bristling with an array of sophisticated-looking antennae and weather sensors. It was a vessel built for research and exploration, a ship that meant business. Ash stood on that deck with the 6 students of his advanced class. They were a diverse group, the best and brightest the newly expanded school had to offer, yet today they seemed a little out of their element, their usual classroom confidence replaced by a slight unsteadiness as they found their sea legs. There was Iona, a sharp, analytical girl with a Vikavolt who viewed every situation as a dataset to be processed. Opposite her was Mateo, a boisterous trainer from a family of Pony Island ranchers, whose Mudsdale was as stoic and powerful as he was overeager. The others, a quiet boy with a Pelosond, a pair of twins with a Plusle and Minnan, and a girl with an elegant Tsarina, watched Ash with intense curiosity, waiting for the day's lesson to begin. "Welcome to your first off-campus lab," Ash announced, his voice carrying easily over the gentle creak of the mooring lines and the cries of distant Pelipper. "Today's lesson is titled, Navigating Unpredictable Variables. Anyone can follow a strategy when the sun is shining and the opponent is standing still. True mastery is about what you do when the plan falls apart. When the terrain shifts, when your equipment fails, when your own psychology becomes the biggest obstacle. The ocean is the ultimate teacher of this principle. It is powerful, it is impartial, and it is, above all, unpredictable." He gestured towards the bridge, where a figure was silhouetted against the bright morning light. "Our environment expert and captain for the day is a woman who understands this better than anyone. This is her classroom. On this ship, her word is law. Captain Swearin." Lana stepped out from the bridge's shadow, and the effect was immediate. Like her ship, she was a study in streamlined competence. She wore a dark blue, all-weather captain's uniform, practical and sharp, with none of the casual flair Ash remembered. Her blue hair was braided back tightly, not a single strand out of place. Her expression was calm, professional, and her sea-green eyes swept over the students with a dispassionate, assessing gaze. There was an aura of authority about her that was absolute. This wasn't just Lana, his friend who loved to fish. This was a captain of the sea. "Welcome aboard the Tidal Spirit," she said, her voice devoid of inflection. It was not an unkind tone, but it was clipped, efficient. "Stow your gear in the designated lockers. Secure all personal items. The deck is a work zone, not a lounge. Watch your footing at all times. The sea doesn't forgive carelessness. Your lesson begins now." With that, she turned and disappeared back into the bridge. The students exchanged nervous glances and quickly scrambled to follow her instructions. Ash watched them, a small smile playing on his lips. He saw Lana's hand on a control inside the bridge, and a moment later, the ship's engines hummed to life, a deep, powerful thrum that vibrated up through the soles of his boots. With a practiced efficiency that spoke of thousands of hours at the helm, Lana guided the Tidal Spirit out of its mooring, the ship moving with a grace that belied its size. As they cleared the marina and the vast, glittering expanse of the Pacific opened up before them, Ash began the practical portion of his lesson. He had the students run through cooperative drills, using their Pokémon to perform complex tasks. Mateo's Mudsdale tested the tensile strength of a tow line. Iona's Vikavolt practiced generating a precise, low-level electromagnetic field to calibrate the ship's sensors. The twins Plusle and Minun worked on creating a controlled electrical charge to power a secondary water pump. It was all about synergy, about seeing their partners not just as combatants, but as integral parts of a functioning team in a dynamic environment. "It's not just about power," Ash explained, walking among them, his voice a calm counterpoint to the rising wind. "It's about application. Why use a flamethrower when a carefully placed ember will do? Why use a hyperbeam when a simple tackle, aimed correctly, can achieve the same result with a fraction of the energy? Efficiency, precision, control. These are the tools that will save your life when raw power isn't enough." Pikachu, perched on a railing with the ease of a seasoned sailor, demonstrated the point. Ash tossed a series of small marker buoys into the churning wake of the ship. "Pikachu, Electroweb, 7-meter diameter, target the negative space between the buoys." Pika. With a flick of his tail, Pikachu leapt into the air and unleashed a net of electricity. It wasn't a blast, but a delicate, intricate web that landed perfectly on the water, its outer edges just brushing the inside of the marker buoy circle. The students murmured in appreciation. It was an attack move, used with the finesse of a surgeon. From the bridge, Lana watched. Her face was unreadable, but her sharp eyes missed nothing. She noted Ash's teaching style, his quiet authority, his focus on practical application over brute force, the seamless, unspoken communication between him and Pikachu. She had known him as a boy full of chaotic energy and boundless heart. This man was different. The energy was still there, but it was now a deep, controlled river, channeled with immense purpose. It was impressive. She respected competence above all else, and Ash Ketchum, it seemed, had become competence personified. They were about 10 nautical miles out, the coastline of Mele Mele a hazy green line on the horizon, when the world began to change. The shift was unnervingly swift. One moment, they were under the brilliant Alolan sun, the sky a vast, unblemished dome of azure. The next, a shadow fell over them, as if a giant hand had been placed over the sun. The sky to the east was no longer blue, but a nauseating, bruised shade of green-gray, churning like spoiled milk. The wind, which had been a steady, playful breeze, suddenly became a shrieking, physical force that tore at their clothes and whipped the ocean's surface into a frenzy. The temperature dropped by 10 degrees in as many seconds. "What's happening?" Matteo shouted over the rising howl of the wind. Inside the bridge, red lights began to flash on Lana's console. Alarms blared, a cacophony of urgent, electronic warnings. "That's impossible," she muttered, her knuckles white as she gripped the helm. Barometric pressure in freefall. Sea state change from 2 to 7 in 60 seconds. This isn't a storm. This is a violation of physics. "Everyone, inside, now." Ash's voice cut through the chaos, no longer the calm instructor but the decisive commander. He herded the stunned students towards the main cabin. "Get below deck and secure yourselves." Just as the last student scrambled inside, the first wave hit. It wasn't a swell, it was a moving wall of water that crashed over the prow, submerging the entire foredeck in a torrent of churning, white foam. The tidal spirit groaned under the impact, shuddering like a living creature in pain. Ash braced himself against the bulkhead, his boots planted wide, the salt spray stinging his face like 1,000 tiny needles. He could feel it. This was no natural phenomenon. Woven into the raw, chaotic fury of the wind and water was that same sterile, hungry rawness he had felt in Lily's lab. The anomaly was not just a background hum anymore, it was here, it was active. Then, the sea erupted. A colossal shape burst from the churning waves off the port bow, a nightmare of slick, mottled flesh and writhing tentacles. It was a tentacruel, but it was a leviathan, easily twice the size of any recorded specimen. Its huge, bulbous head was dominated by two enormous, ruby-red orbs that were not just its eyes, but beacons of pure, undiluted rage. They glowed with a faint, malevolent inner light, a crimson stain on the sickly green twilight of the storm. It let out a deafening, high-pitched shriek that was a sound of agony as much as aggression. By the tapu, Matteo breathed from the cabin doorway, his face pale. The creature's tentacles, each as thick as a tree trunk, slammed against the side of the ship, the impact ringing like a hammer blow on an anvil. The students screamed. Iona, recovering from her initial shock, fumbled for her Pokédex, her analytical mind trying to find a foothold in the madness. Aggression levels, off the charts, she stammered. Physiology inconsistent with known data. "Forget the data," Ash yelled, his calm a stark island in the sea of panic. "This is a variable you can't predict. We're in a survival scenario. Iona, you're Vikavolt, Matteo, Mudsdale, on deck. The rest of you, stay below and brace yourselves." The two students, startled by the direct command, obeyed. Their fear was palpable, but Ash's unwavering confidence was a stronger force. They scrambled onto the lurching deck, their Pokémon appearing beside them, looking just as terrified as their trainers. "What's the plan?" Matteo shouted, his Mudsdale planting its huge hooves, a bastion of stability on the pitching ship. "We don't want to hurt it," Ash commanded. "It's acting on instinct. It's been driven mad by something. Our goal is to deter, disable, and escape. Iona, Vikavolt, zap cannon. Don't aim for its body. Aim for the water, 20 meters off its left side. Create a diversion." The girl nodded, her focus sharpening. Vikavolt, execute command. The insectoid Pokémon zipped into the air, dodging a sweeping tentacle, and fired a concentrated ball of electricity that exploded in the water, creating a blinding flash and a loud crackle. The tentacruel shrieked and recoiled, momentarily distracted. "Matteo, Mudsdale, high horsepower. Use the momentum of the ship as it comes down the next wave. We need to push it back." "Right. Mudsdale, get up." The powerful Pokémon charged, its movements impossibly sure-footed, and slammed into the tentacles that were gripping the ship's railing, forcing them back into the sea. From the bridge, Lana watched the chaos unfold, her hands a blur of motion over her controls. She wasn't just steering, she was dancing with the storm, a desperate, brilliant tango. She threw the engines into reverse, pulling away from a direct strike, then gunned them forward to ride up the face of a monster wave that would have otherwise swamped them. Her mind was a whirlwind of calculations. Wind speed, wave frequency, the tentacruel's attack patterns, the structural integrity of her ship. She was the brain, fighting to keep the body alive. Her internal monologue was a string of curses, not of fear, but of a captain's cold fury. This is wrong. The sea doesn't act like this. It's wild, not malicious. This is a sickness. This thing is in pain, and it's making my ocean sick with it. Ash, on the deck, was the heart, keeping the team fighting. He and Lana were working in a strange, unspoken sync. She would maneuver the ship to give his students a better angle. He would create an opening for her to evade. It was a partnership forged in the crucible of a crisis. Pikachu was a blur of yellow, darting across the deck, too fast for the lumbering tentacles to catch, unleashing precise thunder shocks that made the massive limbs spasm and release their grip without causing lasting damage. The battle was a desperate, minute-by-minute struggle for survival. The Plusle and Minun created a sparking barrier along the railings. The Pelosond used Shore Up to repair cracks in the deck plating as they appeared. The Sarina's Trop Kick, while not powerful enough to cause pain, was irritating enough to make the Tentacruel flinch. They were not winning. They were simply not losing. Ash felt a sudden spike in the creature's rage through his aura, a focused point of killing intent. He looked up and saw it. The Tentacruel was ignoring the Pokémon on the deck. It was looking at the bridge. At Lana. It seemed to recognize her as the ship's controlling intelligence. "Lana, look out!" Ash screamed, but it was too late. With a speed that defied its immense size, the Tentacruel lunged. Not with a single tentacle, but with a dozen. They bypassed the deck entirely, shooting over the students and wrapping around the glass bubble of the bridge. The reinforced glass creaked, then began to crack under the immense pressure. The creature was going to crush the command center, and Lana with it. "No!" Iona screamed, her Vikavolt attacks bouncing harmlessly off the thick, slimy hide. Mateo's Mudsdale was on the wrong side of the ship, unable to help. Panic finally began to set in. The students' coordinated defense fell apart as they watched in horror. The plan had failed. The variable was overwhelming them. In that moment of absolute crisis, Ash's mind became preternaturally calm. The chaos faded to a single, clear point of focus. He saw the problem not as a monster, but as a system to be dismantled. He didn't have the power to overwhelm it, so he would have to outthink it. His voice cut through the terrified silence, sharp and clear as breaking glass. "Iona, Vikavolt, Plusle, Minun, all of you, now. A combined electrical charge. Don't hit the Tentacruel. Hit the water. Surround the ship. Create a paralyzing field." But that could short out the ship's systems. Iona protested, her textbook knowledge warring with the command. "The systems are useless if the captain is dead. Do it now," Ash roared, the sheer force of his conviction silencing all argument. "Mateo. Pelosond. Get ready." The three electric types unleashed their power in perfect unison. A brilliant, crackling web of raw energy spread across the surface of the water around the tidal spirit, turning the immediate vicinity into a churning, electrified cauldron. The Tentacruel, its lower body submerged in that field, let out a titanic roar of pain and shock. Its entire body convulsed, the massive muscles locking up. The crushing grip on the bridge slackened for a single, crucial second. "Mateo, now," Ash bellowed. "Pelosond, Sand Tomb, not on the creature, on the ship, brace us." It was a completely counterintuitive command, but Mateo didn't hesitate. His Pelosond dissolved into a swirling vortex of sand that slammed not into the Tentacruel, but against the port side of the tidal spirit. It was a brilliant, insane piece of improvisation. The sand acted as a massive, temporary buttress, absorbing the ship's momentum and counteracting the Tentacruel's pull, preventing the ship from capsizing from the sudden release of tension. For a heartbeat, there was silence, broken only by the howl of the wind and the crackle of electricity. The Tentacruel, stunned and paralyzed, slowly unwound its tentacles from the fractured bridge. The malevolent red glow in its eyes flickered, then dimmed, replaced by a look of confused exhaustion. With a final, mournful cry, it slipped beneath the waves and was gone. The instant the creature vanished, the storm broke. As if a switch had been flipped, the shrieking wind died down to a whisper. The churning, green-gray clouds seemed to dissolve, revealing a sky stained the color of a blood orange. The sea, though still agitated, calmed its violent thrashing. An eerie, profound silence descended upon the battered ship. On the deck, the students stood, trembling, chests heaving, looking at the spot where the monster had been. They were soaked, bruised, and utterly exhausted, but they were alive. They slowly turned their gazes to Ash, who stood calmly amidst the debris, his expression unreadable. They looked at him not as a teacher, or even as the champion they'd seen on TV. They looked at him as the man who had just walked them through the jaws of death and brought them out the other side. Ash took a deep breath, the scent of ozone and brine sharp in his lungs. He did a quick mental inventory. Everyone was shaken, but no one was seriously injured. The ship was heavily damaged, but it was still afloat. He walked over to Iona and Mateo, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "You did good," he said simply. "Both of you. You followed your instincts when the plan changed. That was the real lesson." He then turned and walked towards the bridge. The door slid open with a groan of twisted metal. Lana was standing at the helm, her hands still gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning with a cold, clear fire. She was surveying the damage reports on a secondary screen, her expression grim. "Hull integrity at 70%, she said, her voice a low, controlled monotone. "Main engines are stable, but the port side stabilizer is offline. Navigation is shot. We'll have to limp home on visual and backup compass." She finally looked at him, her gaze direct, analytical. "That was a good call. The sand buttress. I wouldn't have thought of that." It was the highest praise she could offer, a simple acknowledgement of competence from one professional to another. "You kept us afloat," Ash replied, the same simple respect in his tone. "I just kept the monster busy." He stood beside her, looking out through the spiderweb of cracks in the main viewport. The setting sun bled across the horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The shared trauma and the seamless, desperate teamwork had forged a bond between them that was stronger than any long conversation. Finally, Lana broke the silence, her voice barely a whisper. "That wasn't a normal Pokémon, Ash. I've been sailing these waters my whole life. I've seen angry Pokémon, territorial ones, even sick ones. That was different." She tapped a screen, bringing up a log file. "The barometric pressure drop, the sudden current shift, the electromagnetic interference, it's all wrong. It's like the ocean itself had a fever." She looked at him, her eyes narrowed. And that creature's eyes, they were glowing. It was like it was being poisoned. Not with venom, but with rage. Ash nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the endless, orange-tinted water. "I know. I felt it. The same wrongness I felt on the island yesterday. A kind of static in the world's energy." Lana's professional composure finally cracked, replaced by a flicker of grim vindication. She pulled up a different display, a navigational chart of the Alolan archipelago. It was dotted with dozens of small, color-coded markers. "I've been tracking incidents like this for 6 months, she said, her voice tight. "Small things, at first. A pod of wishy-washy scattering in the wrong season, miles from their usual grounds. A school of Bruxish displaying hyper-aggressive pack behavior in neutral territory. Unexplained equipment malfunctions in the deep trenches." She pointed to a cluster of red markers. "The incidents are getting more frequent. More violent. This was the worst yet. I gave my data to the regional authorities. They dismissed it as a series of unrelated ecological anomalies." "It's not unrelated," Ash said. He told her then about Lily, about the Ether Foundation's research, about the strange energy signature they had dubbed the anomaly. As he spoke, Lana's expression shifted from grim to resolute. The pieces were clicking into place. Lily's theoretical data and her own practical, physical evidence were two halves of the same terrifying whole. The whispers she had been hearing from the sea were finally being given a name. "So, it's real," she said. "It wasn't a question. This anomaly is poisoning my ocean." The possessive pronoun was telling. To Lana, the sea was not a place. It was a part of her, and it was being violated. They fell into silence again, the only sound the steady thrum of the damaged engines as the tidal spirit limped towards the distant, welcoming lights of Mele Mele Island. An unspoken pact had been sealed in the heart of the unnatural storm. They were from different worlds, he a master of the land and the bonds of partnership, she a master of the vast, untamable sea. But a shared threat had made their purposes one. The world was sick, and they were among the few who could feel its fever. The warning from the sea was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. and they were both listening. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Ghosts of the Past and Future. The air on Ula Ula Island didn't just feel different. It tasted different. As Ash stepped off the ferry onto the weathered planks of Malie City's dock, the humid, sun-drenched vibrancy of Mele Mele was instantly replaced by something ancient and heavy. The air was thick, carrying the scent of damp, black earth, the sweet, cloying perfume of decaying blossoms, and the sharp, mineral tang of rain that had fallen hours ago but had yet to evaporate from the jungle's deep shade. The sky was not the brilliant blue he was used to, but a bruised, oyster-gray ceiling of cloud that seemed to press down on the island, trapping the heat in the silence. Even the sounds were muted. The raucous cries of Wingull were replaced by the distant, mournful coo of a noctowl, and the city's usual bustle was a low, respectful murmur, as if no one wanted to disturb the island's slumber. Pikachu, perched on his shoulder, let out a low, inquisitive, "Pika?" His fur bristled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer saturation of the atmosphere. The island's spiritual energy, its mana, was a palpable force here, a deep, slow-moving river that flowed from the heart of the dormant volcano, Mount Lanakila. But today, Ash felt a tremor in that river, a discordant note in its ancient song. It was the anomaly, he knew, but here it manifested differently. It wasn't the sterile, scientific wrongness he'd felt with Lily, nor the raw, violent sickness he'd confronted with Lana. Here, it was a cold spot, a void in the spiritual warmth, a patch of silence in a world that should have been humming with ghostly whispers. It felt like grief. A figure detached itself from the shadows of a nearby pagoda-style building. For a fleeting second, Ash saw the girl he remembered, small, clad in purple, with a mischievous, spooky grin. But the illusion shattered as she stepped into the gray light. Acerola was still Acerola, but the years had honed her, giving her a quiet gravity that coexisted with her eccentric spirit. She was 21 now, and the weight of her lineage was starting to show. She wore a more formal, deep violet hakama, embroidered with subtle silver patterns of crescent moons and drifting mimikyu. Her pale blonde hair was longer, held back from her face by an ornate pin carved from a shard of dusk stone. Her eyes, large and lavender, still held a spark of playful light, but beneath it lay a depth of knowing, the gaze of someone who spent more time conversing with the dead than the living. "The outsider with the heart of Alola returns," she said, her voice a soft, melodic chime that somehow carried perfectly in the heavy air. It was a formal greeting, one of ancient tradition. Then, a more familiar, teasing smile broke through. "Took you long enough, champ. The spirits were starting to think you'd ghosted us for good." Ash chuckled, the sound feeling loud in the quiet. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Acerola. Good to see you." "You too," she said, her smile fading as her perceptive eyes scanned him. She tilted her head, like a Mistrevis studying a strange new object. "You're loud." Ash blinked. "Loud? Not your voice," she clarified, tapping her own temple. "In here. Your spirit. Your aura. It used to be a bonfire. Bright, warm, a little wild. Now, it's a star. Just as bright, but contained. Silent. It has density. The local phantom have been hiding since your fairy was sighted. You're making the quiet ones nervous." The observation was so startlingly accurate that Ash could only nod. She was seeing the same change Kukui and Lily had, but through an entirely different lens. "I've been training," was his simple explanation. "I can tell," she said, turning to lead the way. "Come on. The lecture is at the old Megamart. We've turned it into a transitional space." The thrifty Megamart was no longer the dilapidated, haunted ruin he'd faced his trial in. It had been respectfully restored, a project Acerola herself had overseen. The broken floor tiles were replaced, the collapsed shelves removed, but the spirit of the place was intentionally preserved. It was not a sterile museum. The lighting was kept low, provided by flickering gas lamps and the soft, ethereal glow of curated Lidwick. A section of the original, graffiti-scarred wall was preserved behind glass, a monument to the building's past life. It was now a historical center, a library for lore on Alola's ghost types, and a place where trainers could come to learn and meditate, to better understand the often misunderstood Pokémon. The air inside was cool and smelled of old paper, dust, and ozone. A small audience of Ula Ula trainers and a few of Ash's own students who had made the trip sat quietly on floor cushions, their faces illuminated by the ghostly light. Ash began his lecture. He didn't use a datapad or a holographic display. He simply stood in the center of the room, Pikachu at his side, and began to speak. His voice was calm, measured, and full of a profound empathy that immediately captured the room. We are taught to see ghost types as a mystery, an anomaly, he began. They break the rules of the physical world. They are feared. But what is a ghost? It's a memory. An echo. A powerful emotion, love, or anger, or confusion. So strong that it refuses to fade away. To understand a Gengar's prank, you must first understand the loneliness of the shadow it was born from. To understand a Decidueye's aim, you must understand the absolute focus of a spirit with a singular, unfinished purpose. He spoke of his own Gengar, not of its battle prowess, but of its deep-seated need for belonging, born from the abandonment of its first trainer. He described the protective loyalty of a Palossand, not as a territorial instinct, but as the lingering wool of all the spirits whose memories made up its sands. He was reframing the narrative, teaching not typings and movesets, but motivations and emotions. The trainers listened, spellbound. They weren't just learning how to fight ghost types, they were learning how to see them. As he spoke, he felt it again. A sudden, intense drop in the room's spiritual temperature. It was the anomaly, asserting itself. A nearby Litwick flickered violently, its purple flame turning a sickly, pale green for a moment. An unseen Mimikyu under a display case let out a pained, scraping cry. Acerola, who had been watching from the side with a serene smile, suddenly stiffened, her eyes wide. She felt it too, a wave of spiritual nausea. Ash paused, his senses reaching out. The anomaly felt like a puncture in the world's fabric, and through it, the natural spiritual energy, the ambient emotion that ghost types fed on, was draining away, being replaced by a sterile nothingness. To the spirits, it must feel like slow starvation. He subtly projected a wave of his own aura, warm, steady, reassuring. And the agitated spirits calmed, the Litwick's flame returning to its healthy purple. He finished his lecture without acknowledging the incident, but a silent, worried understanding passed between him and Acerola. After the applause had faded and the trainers had dispersed, she approached him, her playful demeanor gone, replaced by a somber intensity. "The ancestors are restless," she said, her voice a low whisper. "The veil is thin today. You felt it, didn't you? The cold spot." "I felt it on Mele Mele, and on the ocean," Ash confirmed. "But here, it feels different. It feels like it's attacking the island's spirit." "It is," she said, her gaze distant. "The whispers have been getting frantic. They speak of a silent hunger, a creeping shadow that consumes memory. They are afraid. I have to know what it is. And I think you are the only one who can help me see it." She looked at him, her lavender eyes pleading. "Will you come with me? To Tapu Village?" The name sent a shiver down Ash's spine. The village, destroyed by a Guzzlord years ago, was a place of immense tragedy, a scar on the island's soul. It was also a place of immense spiritual power. "Of course," he said without hesitation. Their journey to the ruins was not a simple hike. Acerola led him away from the main roads, onto ancient, overgrown paths that were invisible to the untrained eye. The jungle closed in around them, a suffocatingly beautiful prison of giant ferns, hanging vines, and the gnarled, moss-covered trunks of ancient trees. The air grew heavier, the silence deeper. There were no bird calls here, no rustling of small Pokémon in the undergrowth. It was a sacred, sorrowful silence. Acerola moved through this world as if she were a part of it. She pointed out a patch of moss that fed on moonlight and was used in remedies to calm troubled spirits. She identified the nearly invisible tracks of a Mimikyu, explaining that they only walk backwards when they are returning to a place of great sadness. Ash, for his part, was experiencing the jungle through his aura. He could feel the ancient, dormant life in the trees, the faint, sorrowful echoes of the spirits that lingered in the damp earth. He could also feel the anomaly growing stronger as they walked, a spreading patch of cold that felt like a dead nerve in the living body of the island. They finally arrived at the ruins of Tapu Village. It was a heartbreaking sight. The foundations of old houses were being reclaimed by the jungle, covered in a blanket of green. A broken stone archway, once the entrance, stood like a tombstone. The place was saturated with a profound, lingering sadness, an emotional echo so powerful it was almost a physical weight. But beneath the sadness, there was also a deep, resonant hum of power. This was a place where the barrier between the physical and spiritual worlds was almost non-existent. In the center of the ruins was a large, flat stone dais, untouched by the encroaching wilderness. It was the place where the village elders once communed with Tapu Bulu. Acerola walked to its center and turned to Ash. "The spirits brought you here for a reason," she said, her voice barely audible. "Your power, your aura, it is a bridge. I can listen to the whispers, but they are faint and chaotic. With you, I think we can open a door. See what they see." "What do you want me to do?" Ash asked, his expression serious. "Just be here," she said. "Sit. Clear your mind. Reach out with your energy, and let it harmonize with the islands. I will do the rest." Ash nodded, sitting cross-legged on the cool stone opposite her. He closed his eyes, and Pikachu, sensing the gravity of the moment, curled up at the base of the dais, a silent, watchful guardian. Ash drew on the meditative techniques he had perfected on Mount Silver. He quieted his thoughts, slowed his breathing, and sank his consciousness deep into the flow of his own aura. He then extended it, not as a projection, but as an offering. He let it seep into the ancient stone beneath him, reaching down into the heart of Ulaula. He felt the island's mana respond, a slow, deep, powerful current of life, sorrow, and memory. He felt Acerola's own spiritual energy, a cool, gentle stream of moonlight, intertwine with his. They were connected now, to each other, and to the island. Acerola began to chant, her voice a low, hypnotic hum. The words were in an ancient Alolan dialect, a language of pure spirit. As she chanted, the air grew cold. The gray light began to fail. A profound silence fell, so complete that Ash could hear the blood pounding in his own ears. And then, the vision hit them. It was not a dream, it was a plunge. One moment, they were in the ruins. The next, they were nowhere. They were adrift in a fractured, broken reality. Sight. Alola, but not Alola. The vibrant greens were gone, replaced by a sterile, crystalline gray that coated everything: trees, rocks, the silent ocean. It wasn't ice or rock, but some kind of energy fossilized into matter. It absorbed light, creating a world of dull, lifeless twilight. There were no colors. There was no movement. Sound. An unbearable, low-frequency hum that vibrated in Ash's bones, accompanied by a rhythmic, grinding, drilling noise that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the sound of reality being torn apart at its seams. There were no Pokemon cries. No wind. No waves. Only the hum and the drill. Feeling. An absolute, soul-crushing cold. A profound emptiness. A feeling of utter and complete finality. This was not a world that was dying. It was a world that was already dead, its very concept of life erased. Images flashed through their shared consciousness, too fast to properly comprehend but burned into their minds. Tapu Koko, its vibrant shell cracked and gray, silent and still within its crystalline prison. A single, perfect plumeria blossom, its color draining away as the gray crystal crept up its stem. The Pokemon School, a hollow, silent shell under the dead, gray sky. Lily, Lana, Mallow, their faces frozen in a moment of despair before dissolving into crystalline dust. Then, the perspective shifted. They were rocketing through a void, a tunnel of non-existence. They saw the source. A colossal machine, a thing of impossible geometry and dark, alien metal, was latched onto the fabric of their dimension like a parasite. At its heart was a drill, not of metal, but of pure, concentrated void, and it was boring a hole into the heart of Alola, siphoning its life, its color, its very soul, leaving behind the gray, crystalline death. They saw a logo on the side of the impossible machine, a stylized X, within a circle, Xenocorp. The vision shattered. Ash and Acerola were thrown back into their own bodies with a violent jolt. They both gasped, chests heaving, cold sweat pouring down their faces. Ash looked at his hands, half expecting to see them turning to gray crystal. Acerola was trembling, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it seemed to have aged her a decade. The shared experience had left an indelible mark, a psychic scar that now bound them together. Did you see it?" she whispered, her voice cracking. The crystal, the silence, Ash breathed, the horrifying images still burning behind his eyelids. Xenocorp. Acerola's trembling slowly subsided, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. She looked at Ash, her lavender eyes filled with a new, terrifying clarity. "It is as the prophecies foretold," she said, her voice now steady, imbued with the ancient authority of her bloodline. "My great-uncle told me the stories, but he thought they were just legends. Warnings. Not a future we would have to face." "What prophecies?" Ash asked, his own dread coalescing into a sharp point of focus. "They speak of a blight from beyond the sky and between the moments," she recited, the words sounding like they were pulled from the very stone of the ruins. "A silent hunger that would not devour the body, but the mana, the soul of the world. It would come disguised as a gift, a promise of a brighter future, but it would leave only a gray, silent echo in its wake." She stood up, her small frame seeming to possess an immense, ancient power. She looked at Ash, and he felt as though he were being seen not just by a girl, but by 100 generations of her ancestors. "The prophecies also speak of a counter," she continued, her voice resonating with conviction. "When the silent hunger arrives, the tapu will not be enough. The islands would need a champion. A guardian. Someone not born of Alola's soil, but who possessed its heart. An outsider whose own mana was so strong, so pure, that it could act as a rallying point, a shield to unite the people, the Pokémon, and the very tapu themselves against the encroaching silence." She took a step towards him, her eyes locking onto his. There was no doubt in her gaze, no hesitation. There was only absolute, terrifying faith. "The spirits did not bring you back to Alola to be a teacher, Ash Ketchum," she declared, her voice ringing with the weight of destiny. "They brought you back to be its guardian. The vision, it showed us what we are fighting against. But your presence here, it is the prophecy beginning to be fulfilled. We saw their end. Now, we have to write a different one." The gray clouds above finally broke, and a cold, steady rain began to fall, washing over the ruins and the two figures who stood at their heart. But the rain could not wash away the horror of what they had seen, nor the immense, crushing weight of the destiny that had just been placed squarely on Ash's shoulders. The whispers of the past had just screamed a warning about the future. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4 The Boardroom and the Battlefield. The lie was beautiful. It was broadcast across every screen in Alola, a vision of pristine, sun-drenched progress. The press conference was being held in the main conservation dome of Ether Paradise, a carefully chosen stage. Behind the podium, a breathtaking panorama of lush greenery and cascading waterfalls served as a backdrop, populated by Pokémon living in meticulously crafted harmony. The air itself was conditioned to a perfect, humidity-free warmth, scented with a subtle hint of hibiscus. It was nature, perfected and commodified. On the stage, radiating a confidence as polished and blinding as the white marble floor, was Marcus Sterling, CEO of Xenocorp. He was a man who looked like he'd been designed by a marketing committee, impeccably tailored silver suit, a warm, trustworthy smile that didn't quite reach his cool, calculating eyes, and a deep, resonant voice that made even the most audacious claims sound like foregone conclusions. At his side, lending the entire affair an almost unassailable-looking stamp of approval, was Lusamine. She, too, had changed in the intervening years, her past mania replaced by a serene, almost maternal grace, her dedication to Pokémon conservation now the genuine core of her public identity. In a discreet seat in the back row of the assembled press and dignitaries, Lily watched, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. She had been obligated to attend, a high-ranking ether researcher at a Foundation-hosted event. Every practiced smile from Sterling, every carefully crafted platitude, felt like a physical affront to her scientific integrity. "Not just about power," Sterling was saying, his voice a soothing balm of corporate doublespeak. "It's about partnership. A partnership with this beautiful land. The Alola Future Energy Initiative will harness the immense, clean geothermal power of these islands, a power that has lain dormant for too long." A holographic display shimmered to life behind him, showing an animated graphic of clean, blue energy rising from a stylized volcano and flowing into happy, brightly lit homes. "We are not drilling. We are not fracking. We are, in the simplest terms, listening to the heartbeat of Alola and harmonizing with it. Providing limitless, zero-emission energy that will not only power Alola's future but will preserve its sacred past." Lily let out a quiet, involuntary scoff. Harmonizing? The energy signature she had shown Ash was the antithesis of harmony. It was a dissonant, parasitic vibration. The science Sterling's presentation was glossing over was impossible. Geothermal energy didn't produce dimensional shearing. He was using a real, tangible concept as a mask for something alien, something monstrous. She looked at her mother, seeing the genuine hope in her eyes, and felt a pang of despair. Lusamine, for all her good intentions, was being played, her Foundation's hard-won reputation being used to legitimize a wolf in sheep's clothing. Miles away, in a quiet corner of the Pokemon School's library, Ash watched the same broadcast on a student's datapad. The library smelled of old books and floor polish, a scent of quiet knowledge and accumulated truth. The contrast between his surroundings and the slick, hollow presentation on the screen was jarring. He wasn't listening to Sterling's words. He was watching his energy, his aura. The man was a black hole. His charisma was a carefully constructed gravity well, pulling in the hopes and beliefs of everyone watching, while his core was a void of utter, chilling self-interest. The vision Acerola had shown him, the gray, crystalline death, was the product of this man's ambition. Impressive, isn't he? A new voice said, crisp and professional. He could sell sand to a Pelosond. Ash looked up. A woman stood there, her posture perfectly straight, her dark business suit impeccably tailored. She had short, practical lavender hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to be constantly assessing, categorizing, and filing away information. Her presence felt contained, like a powerful Pokemon holding its energy in reserve. She carried an air of quiet, unshakable authority. "I'm Annabelle," she said, extending a hand. Her handshake was firm, brief. "From the International Trainers Guild. I'm here to assess the school's advanced curriculum. Professor Kukui speaks very highly of your methods." The cover was perfect. Plausible. Professional. But Ash's senses, honed by his vision and the battle on the sea, felt the lie beneath the surface. Her aura was not that of an academic or a guild liaison. It was sharp, disciplined, and focused, like the edge of a well-honed blade. He could feel the immense weight of responsibility she carried. "Ash Ketchum," he replied, his tone neutral. He turned his attention back to the screen, where Sterling was now shaking Lusamine's hand to a wave of enthusiastic applause. "He's selling them a pretty story." "The best lies always are," Annabelle said, her eyes fixed on him, not the screen. "Professor Kukui isn't in his office. I was hoping you might be willing to give me the tour. Specifically, I'd like to see your in-field training facilities, the more secluded ones." It was a test. A request wrapped in a command. Ash met her gaze, and for a moment, the polite fiction between them fell away. He saw a fellow soldier, someone who recognized the world was not as it seemed. He nodded slowly, closing the datapad and cutting off Sterling's triumphant smile in mid-frame. "I think I know just the place." He led her away from the bustling main campus, past the manicured lawns and cheerful student chatter, onto a dusty, little-used path that wound its way up into the rugged hills behind the school. The air grew hotter, drier. The lush greenery gave way to tough, scrubby bushes and exposed shelves of red volcanic rock. They walked in silence for 10 minutes, the only sound the crunch of their shoes on the gravel and the harsh cry of a distant Firo. Finally, they arrived at a natural canyon, a deep scar in the earth carved by ancient lava flows. The walls were sheer cliffs of basalt, and the floor was a flat expanse of baked, red clay, cracked by the unrelenting heat of the midday's sun. It was a natural, unforgiving amphitheater, a place stripped of all pleasantries. It was a battlefield. Annabelle stopped at the canyon's edge, surveying the area with a practiced, tactical eye. "This will do," she said. She turned to face him, and this time, there was no pretense. The polite guild representative was gone, replaced by a woman of immense and formidable authority. "The International Trainers Guild is my cover. My real employers are the International Police. My rank is Section Chief, Ultra Beast Division." She didn't show him a badge. She didn't need to. The truth of her words resonated in her stance, in the absolute seriousness of her gaze. "We need to talk about Xenocorp," she continued, her voice low and urgent. 2 months ago, Dr. Aris Thorne, a leading researcher in dimensional physics and a former ether scientist who specialized in ultra-wormhole energy signatures, vanished from his lab in Unova. A week later, Faba, your own former ether branch chief, also disappeared from a secure IP holding facility. Over the last year, a total of 7 top-level scientists, all specialists in extradimensional energy, have gone missing. The only common thread is that they had all, at one point, expressed professional interest in Xenocorp's theoretical energy projects. Ash listened, his expression grim. It all fit. The impossible science, the dimensional anomalies. Xenocorp wasn't developing technology. They were stealing the minds that could build it. We believe Xenocorp is weaponizing dimensional energy, Annabelle stated flatly. The problem is, they're protected. Politically, economically. Sterling is a master of public relations. He's untouchable. We have no concrete proof, only a string of disappearances and a growing mountain of circumstantial evidence. That's where you come in. Me? Ash asked, though he already knew the answer. You are a walking dimensional anomaly yourself, Ash Ketchum, Annabelle said, a flicker of something almost like scientific curiosity in her eyes. Our records on you are extensive. The incident with the unknown. The Tree of Beginning. Dialga and Palkia in Alamos Town. Your connection to the Ultra Beasts here in Alola. You are a nexus point for events that defy conventional physics. And then, 5 years ago, you disappeared. The official report says you retired to a private life. We know you went to Mount Silver. We don't know what you did there. She took a step closer, her gaze intense. I am here because my superiors need to know what you are capable of. Not the you from the World Coronation series. The you that stands before me now. Reports and battle videos are insufficient. I need a practical demonstration. I need to know if you are an asset we can use, or a liability we have to contain. It was a challenge, laid bare in the harsh sunlight. A threat, veiled in the language of professional assessment. Ash's expression didn't change. He simply unclipped a single Pokeball from his belt. Who do you want to see? Annabelle's lips curved into a faint, grim smile. She, too, produced a heavy-duty Ultra Ball. Show me the partner you trust the most when the stakes are highest. The air in the canyon seemed to shimmer with sudden, immense pressure. Annabelle threw her ball, and from it emerged a titan of chrome and steel. Her Metagross. It slammed into the clay floor with the force of a meteor, its 4 powerful legs digging into the ground. Its red, cross-shaped eye glowed with cold, analytical light, instantly assessing Ash, the terrain, the ambient temperature, 1,000 variables processed in a nanosecond. It was less a Pokémon and more a sentient supercomputer housed in a main battle tank. Ash tossed his own ball. The creature that emerged was a stark contrast. Where the Metagross was cold steel and rigid logic, this Pokémon was a being of pure, white-hot fire and furious energy. Infernape. He landed in a low crouch, knuckles brushing the ground, his eyes burning with an intelligent, controlled flame. The crown of fire on his head was not the wild, explosive blaze of his youth. It was a steady, intense burn, the fire of a master who had tamed his own inner inferno. He and Ash had spent 5 years on that frozen mountain, and in the process, had forged their shared passion into a weapon of impossible sharpness. Annabelle's eyes widened slightly. She knew this Infernape from the records of the Sinnoh League. She knew of its volatile blaze ability. But this creature, it carried itself differently. There was a dangerous stillness to it. One-on-one, Annabelle stated. No time limit. The battle ends when one of us is unable to continue. Are you ready? Ash simply nodded. Infernape mirrored the gesture, giving a low growl of assent. Metagross, Annabelle commanded, her voice sharp as flint. Psychic terrain. The Metagross's eye glowed, and a wave of cosmic energy washed over the canyon floor, causing the air to glitter with pinkish light. The very ground seemed to hum with psychic power. It was a strategic opening move, boosting the power of its psychic attacks and protecting it from priority moves. It was the move of a chess grandmaster, controlling the board before the first piece was taken. Meteor Mash. Metagross levitated, tucked its legs, and shot forward like a chrome bullet, wreathed in stellar energy. Dodge left. Dig, Ash said, his voice perfectly calm. Infernape moved with explosive speed, a blur of motion that evaded the charging behemoth by inches. The Meteor Mash slammed into the canyon wall, shattering rock and sending dust everywhere. Before the dust could even settle, Infernape had already vanished beneath the earth. Annabelle didn't flinch. Magnet rise. Scan pattern delta. Metagross rose into the air, its body glowing with magnetic energy, negating the advantage of a ground-based attack. Its eye pulsed, scanning the ground below, tracking the vibrations of Infernape's movement. It was a perfect counter. There, Annabelle said. Hammer arm. Maximum force. Metagross located Infernape's position and brought one of its massive steel legs down like a piledriver. The impact cracked the very floor of the canyon, sending a shockwave out in all directions. "Now, Mach Punch," Ash commanded from the canyon's edge. As the dust from the hammer arm erupted upwards, Infernape burst from the ground behind Metagross. The dig had been a feint, a way to reposition under the cover of Metagross's own attack. Before the psychic behemoth could react, Infernape's fist, glowing with fighting energy, slammed into its back. The blow was powerful, but Metagross's armor was incredibly durable. It roared in annoyance more than pain and spun, firing a point-blank psychic blast. "Flare Blitz." Through it, Ash ordered. It was a command that defied all logic. No one charged through a super-effective psychic attack, but Infernape didn't hesitate. Engulfing himself in a spiral of searing flame, he charged headfirst into the blast. The psychic energy tore at him, but the sheer, overwhelming force of his own fire acted as a shield, burning through the attack with raw, untamed power. He slammed into Metagross's core, and the resulting explosion sent both Pokémon flying backwards. Annabelle's professional calm was finally broken by a look of genuine shock. This wasn't strategy. This was controlled chaos. Ash wasn't playing by the rules of type advantages and tactical exchanges. He was creating his own rules, using his Pokémon's raw power and unbreakable will to shatter his opponent's calculations. "This is what I learned on the mountain, Annabelle," Ash said, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "A battle isn't an equation. It's a conversation. And sometimes, you have to scream to be heard." Metagross recovered first, its computer brain rebooting from the sheer audacity of the attack. "Giga Impact," Annabelle commanded, deciding to meet overwhelming force with overwhelming force. A swirling vortex of destructive purple energy formed around Metagross as it prepared to launch its ultimate physical attack. Ash saw it coming. He saw the energy gathering, the slight dip in Metagross's altitude as it braced itself. He also saw Infernape, panting, bruised from the recoil of Flare Blitz and the psychic attack. Its flame was wavering. It was near its limit. And then, it happened. The flame on Infernape's head suddenly erupted, growing to 3 times its normal size, burning with a ferocious, almost blinding white-hot intensity. Blaze. But this wasn't the wild, desperate rage of the past. Infernape's eyes were clear, focused entirely on Ash. He was in complete control of the maelstrom within him, a willing conduit for a power that would have once consumed him. Ash met his partner's gaze. In that silent exchange, 1,000 battles, a decade of shared struggle and triumph, all culminated in a single, perfect understanding. "Close combat," Ash said, his voice soft, almost a whisper. It wasn't a command. It was an agreement. As Metagross shot forward, a comet of purple destruction, Infernape vanished. He didn't run. He simply moved, a blur of impossible speed, no longer just a fighter but an embodiment of fire and fury. He appeared at Metagross's side, his fists and feet a torrent of blows that landed with the sound of cracking thunder against the steel plating. It was a storm of attacks, so fast and so ferocious that Metagross's Giga Impact sputtered and died, its focus shattered, its body battered by the relentless assault. Each blow landed on a joint, a seam, a weak point that Ash had been observing throughout the entire battle. The final blow, a devastating uppercut, sent the 4-ton Pokémon crashing back to the canyon floor, kicking up a tidal wave of dust and debris. The canyon fell silent. The psychic terrain faded. The only sound was Infernape's ragged breathing, his body steaming in the harsh sun, the fire on his head slowly receding to its normal size. From within the enormous dust cloud, a faint red light signaled Metagross's return to its Ultra Ball. Annabelle stood frozen for a long moment, the recall device in her hand. The battle was over. She had lost. But she wasn't looking at Infernape. She was looking at Ash. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't panicked. He had guided his Pokémon through a storm of impossible odds with a calm that was far more terrifying than any roar. The dust settled, revealing the battered canyon floor. Ash walked over to Infernape, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You were incredible," he said quietly. "Get a long rest." He recalled his partner, the red light a gentle, respectful acknowledgement of his effort. Annabelle finally moved, walking to the center of the battlefield to stand before Ash. The sun was beginning to dip towards the horizon, casting long, stark shadows across the red earth. The International Police has a power ranking system for trainers and Pokemon. A quantifiable metric based on battle data, she said, her voice a low monotone, though Ash could now detect the undercurrent of awe. What I just saw, it doesn't fit on that scale. The bond you have, the way you adapt, it's unquantifiable. She looked him in the eye, her professional mask finally, completely gone, replaced by the grim look of a soldier who has just found an unexpected and terrifyingly powerful ally. The reports didn't do you justice, Ash Ketchum. Not even close. So, am I an asset? Ash asked, his tone neutral. You're our only chance, she replied without hesitation. Sterling is giving a keynote speech at a gala in Howoli City tonight. He'll be accepting an award for innovations in ecological preservation. He'll be talking about the bright future he's building for Alola. She gestured to the cracked, broken earth around them, the shattered rocks, the lingering smell of ozone and burnt psychic energy. You and I, we just saw the truth of what that future costs. The two fronts of the war had been established. One would be fought in boardrooms and at press conferences, a battle of lies and influence. The other would be fought here, in the secluded canyons and the dark places of the world, a battle of fire and will. And Ash, standing in the ruins of their first skirmish, knew he was now fighting on both. Chapter 4 End.